All right, well, good evening, everybody. We'll get started. Welcome to the number 9 of the Airworthiness Webinar series for tonight. Again, I'll try and keep everyone muted. If you want to ask a question and you didn't register, please raise your hand using the control panel, and I'll then unmute you if you want to ask a question. You can use the chat box if you want to type in questions at relevant intervals. This one will cover an update on where we're at with the airworthiness system, a bit of a summary over the last 5 years. We'll talk a little bit about Pawnee inspections, even though that's not directly gliding related. It's very important to the gliding system that the primary tow plane actually remains in the air. Some of the airworthiness aspects of recent incidents and a bit of a rundown on some of the more interesting recent defect reports. So the current health of the airworthiness system. The finances continue to be robust. Over the last 5 years, 80 to 85% of the income is from the annual inspection kit sales. That's been very steady. We continually have about 730 odd aircraft purchase an annual inspection kit each year. In terms of expenses, we had quite a lull in expenses over 2020 and 2021, which was during the COVID pandemic. And a lot of that lull was due to audits not being carried out. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. The audits not being carried out left a real hangover in the system that had to be knocked over in the last 12 months. So there was an increase in expense in covering the costs of doing the audits of the airworthiness audits at various clubs around the place. Also, in the last 12 months, we had the costs associated with running the electric propulsion course with the Yonkers. Also, there was the start of, again, wage rises. The cost of living started going up for the staff. And what this chart only shows is that amount of income and expenses that are directly credited to the airworthiness department. It doesn't include the office staff costs, like a percentage of Fiona or Tanya's time, who spend time doing airworthiness tasks, or some of the costs involved with the Salesforce licenses, some of the IT costs. As I said before, Form 2 kits continue to be reasonably steady. We're most likely going to achieve 730 this year, which is very similar to what we did last year. The trend is not continuous throughout the year. It steps and stairs, but this year in particular. There was a noticeable drop when the Pawnee AD came out. Whether that's coincidental or not, different question. I suspect quite a few people expected Pawnees to be grounded, and therefore they weren't going to be doing the annual inspection on their sail plane for this summer if they weren't going to be able to get a launch. Once Pawnee started passing the AD, there was a noticeable increase in Form 2 sales. At the time, I expected something similar to happen with membership renewals as well, where people would not necessarily renew their gliding membership if they thought they weren't going to be able to get a launch. That's the where we're at with the Form 2 kit sales per year. Now, I've estimated the actual result for this year, but it's going to be pretty close. Since this does constitute the lion's share of the income for airworthiness and how we fund airworthiness within Gliding Australia, the secret would be to get more aircraft in the air. That would then either allow more work to be done in the airworthiness sphere or a drop in the price of the annual inspection kit. So I use that as a bit of a proxy for membership. So where the rest of Gliding Australia's income comes from membership fees, Airworthiness gets its funding from annual inspection kit sales. The current health of where we're at with authorisations or ratings over the last 5 years, relatively steady. Now, this shows the highest rating that someone has in a particular area. So if you are an annual inspector, you'll automatically have the component of replacement rating as well, but I haven't included those in the numbers. So if the highest rating you have is a component replacement, you'll be included in that category. So relatively constant over the last 5 years. The number of women inspectors and the younger inspectors is constant. I had hoped over the last few years we'd be able to make more of a dent in that and more of an improvement. That hasn't worked out as well as I'd hoped, but we tried. Annual inspector, again, relatively constant, slight increase this year overall across the history there. Again, a small improvement in the number of women inspectors and younger inspectors around the place, just not quite as much as I'd hoped to achieve over the last couple of years. Minor repairs, steady. Major repairs is an area we need to keep an eye on. It takes a long time to grow or train someone into major repairs. So having a rapid drop-off in that skill set is not something that we're going to easily replace in the short term. It takes a while to train those people up and get the experience. So there's one to watch there. The survey rating was one that I missed out in some of the earlier years of the scorecard I was producing for airworthiness. It's relatively static. Weight and balance, we've had the weight and balance training courses at Benalla and Gawler late this year. So we've now got 20 people who are waiting to complete their training by doing a number of weight and balance or weighs on aircraft under supervision. So they're on their P plates. That will then bring up the number of people with basic weight and balance up to 26, which is a significant step forwards. Once we start seeing those numbers pick up, we'll start running on the advanced weight and balance courses as well, and we'll start to upgrade a few people along the way. Engines are relatively static. There's an increase in the replacement of components this year, and that was largely stemming from people who attended the electric propulsion training course with Yonkers. So we had a number of people who did not necessarily hold engine ratings prior to that who were particularly interested in electric propulsion systems, gain a rating there. Minor overhaul and major overhaul of engines, relatively constant. The refinishing is also constant, and the number of AMOs still kicking around is also constant at the moment. We do have a new AMO pop up at about the same rate as a old AMO drops out of the system. So we've been fortunate there in that we're maintaining parity. John has a question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I've got you.
Fantastic. Electric propulsion. Is there any course or chance of courses for FES propulsion?
We're working with, or we actually have inquired from the FES producers over in Europe whether they want to send someone out to run a training course. And we've also talking with the FES agent here in Australia whether that person wants to run a training course. We do have money put aside in the budget for next year for the running of electric propulsion training. It's just a matter of the other parties putting forward their proposal of what they want to do. So the ball is very firmly in their court. If they want to come over or run a training package, more than happy to facilitate it.
Fantastic. I'm mad keen to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of interest in the technology out there. We've also been having discussions with Schleicher about training for their system. That's ongoing. I'm sure that Schempp will be bringing out electric propulsion in the not too distant future. I did look at some of the YouTube videos coming out of Friedrichshafen Aero display earlier this year, and almost every sailplane manufacturer is bringing out electric self-launch sailplanes in the very near future. So it's happening. We are fortunate in that most of them are using a very similar kind of setup or a very similar kind of system from pretty much the one manufacturer. Fez is the outlier, having developed their own system, which is somewhat different in architecture and arrangements to what the other manufacturers are using.
Yeah.
So keen to make it happen. It's just a matter of, and it's a long way to come for Luca or someone to come out from the Fez factory to come out here and provide the training. However, we've been asking the questions and saying, well, we've got money to help support this. It's just a matter of them coming to the party, so to speak.
Is there any scope for someone to go over there and get trained so they can come back here and deliver the course?
That's been suggested previously. Individuals have gone over to various factories to be trained. That's been out of their own pocket, and some of them are somewhat reluctant then to pass on that training to others. There's been contention previously where people have effectively got a free overseas trip out of doing something like that that's been paid for or sponsored by Gliding Australia, which has ruffled some feathers in some corners. I'd like to see if we can get someone from the factory to come out as a first priority. If not, maybe the local agent can step up and provide the training. If not, then it will be up to the Aero department to sort out whether they're going to fork out the money to send someone overseas to get trained and then come back.
Okay.
And you can put your hand now down when you get round to it, John. All right. So getting back on track, the number of AMOs has been fortunate in that as one drops out, we have one start up again. Audits, as I alluded to before, fell into a huge hole around the COVID era. People were reluctant to visit other clubs either because they didn't want the risk of spreading COVID or catching it themselves. And we had a very large backlog accumulate over those 2 years. There's been a huge effort by the RMAs and other volunteers to recover from this over the last 12 months, which was part of why there was an increase in airworthiness expenses. It was covering the costs of getting people out to the clubs. However, audits continue to be a bit of a rub point, and it's been proposed to change the audit system from every 2 years to every 4 years. Now, this is not necessarily guaranteed at this point. This is a proposal. So move it out to every 4 years with a self-audit questionnaire at the 2-year mark. Now, I've seen a draft of that self-audit questionnaire. That needs a bit more work. It needs to be rigorous enough to be of value to the club to sit down and do it, but it doesn't necessarily need to be 18 or 20 pages, which is so intimidating that no one gets around to doing it. So it needs a little bit of work to develop that further and to try and find that even balance between something that's useful and something that's not overly burdensome. Another proposal that's in the works is the possibility to actually pay people to go and carry out the audits, put a financial incentive there around it. One of the provisos then would be that the people carrying out the audits would have to be audit qualified. So you're moving into a professional territory there where you have someone appropriately trained being paid some recompense for their time to go out and do it. Now, that is still a proposal at this point in time. It's not currently in the airworthiness budget, but it's something to be considered in 2025. But it's part of the course. Where finding volunteers to carry out the work is getting difficult, and the amount of time that each volunteer is contributing is getting less and less. So it is a bit of an exponential curve across all areas. The self-audit would also need to meet the Part 149 requirements. Yes, the audit manual was part of the Part 149 requirements. We would then, when we make the changes, go through the change management process. That would include informing CASA and get CASA approval of what we propose. So we do have a fairly rigorous change management process in place with Part 149, and the two processes that we used as training for the exec to run through this was the visual awareness lights change to MOSP3, which went through in April this year, and the lithium ferrous phosphate approval to MOSP3 that also went through in April this year. They were the two practice runs through the existing change management system. So coming up soon, I ran the two courses for weight and balance at Benalla and Gawler respectively. There are quite a few suggestions that came out of that, being the first two courses that had been run since we've achieved the weight and balance approval. So there's a couple of changes in the works for the weight and balance manual out of that. One was to include a lot more worked examples for all the equations featured in the manual, mostly in section 6, and the addition of a flowchart for the weighing process. So that's a one-pager that you could print out or copy and then have it with you when you're doing the weigh to follow the bouncing ball. Now, at the moment, the next weight and balance course is scheduled for 15th and 16th of February in Queensland. I'm just waiting for confirmation of those dates and the location. I did have either Caboolture or Kingaroy suggested, but just waiting to hear back from the Queenslanders. So, Scott, you wanted to have a question? I'll see if I can unmute you.
I've done it.
Okay, you've done it.
So we had the backup or second signature thing, which was going to be via that software, which last I heard wasn't fully approved yet. Has that got any further?
Okay. Yes. The people who have passed the last of the two training courses now have a copy of an approved Excel spreadsheet. I will be sending that out to all the other people with weight and balance ratings shortly.
That's fine. Thanks.
Not a problem. So just waiting confirmation from the RMAs in Queensland about location and confirmation of the dates for the next training in Queensland. One of the experiences we had with the weight and balance training at Benalla and Gawler is quite a few of the people attending had not done any mathematics since leaving high school some 3 decades ago and struggled with the mathematics. So I'll look at running some maths tutorials prior to the course by webinar, just to refresh the brain cells on number crunching. And there were a few people who sadly did not pass the course in Benalla and Gawler, and they'll be invited along to refresh some brain cells there on mathematics and use of equations. And I'll get details out to them either late this year or early next year. The flavour of the month for the last 3 or 4 months of my life are the Pawnee inspections. The CASA equivalent in Argentina, ANAC, issued a airworthiness directive in mid-July. That was a result of 3 crashes involving failure of the front spar on Pawnees. Now, one of those was highly publicised. It was all over YouTube. And if you log into YouTube and search for plane crash baby gender reveal, I think it still comes up fairly promptly. This AD requires inspection of the front spar in key areas for corrosion. Now, the corrosion is most likely from exposure to superphosphate. It is corrosive with aluminium. Misdrilled holes, which form potential crack sites, and cracks originating either from the misdrilled holes or from the corrosion. The inspections required 2 service bulletins from Lavia SA, Service Bulletin 09 and Service Bulletin 11. One of the catches there was Service Bulletin 11 was only available in Spanish. Now, I've since heard that there is an official English version available, but I haven't been able to get my mitts on it just yet. We were exceptionally lucky that we were able to purchase a set of service bulletins from Lavia SA. Shortly after that, for whatever reason, Lavia SA stopped responding to queries worldwide. So we were one of the few countries who were able to get the service bulletins from them. A lot of other countries who started inquiring not that long after we purchased the service bulletins were unable to get a response out of Lavia SA. Either they were overwhelmed or there was some other issue going on. Now, only just recently, we've re-established contact. I've now got a direct email address to one of their engineers. The bandwidth is still slow. It still takes either days or a week or so for them to respond to my emails, but at least we have a connection again, which is a bit of a relief. This is a photo of a bare Pawnee wing. It shows the 2 areas that were in the Argentine investigation report, an accident in Argentina just outside of the hard walk area, and an accident in Colombia, which was a little further outboard. I don't have details of where the spar on the Mexican crash failed, but from the video it looks fairly inboard. Given the agricultural history of most of the Pawnee feet used in gliding, there's a pretty high risk of us finding misdrilled holes and other problems in the spars. These are sins of the past where with the leading edge change, you fold the leading edge skins back over the spar flanges and then people just drilling holes wherever they felt like or about there somewhere, which was unfortunate. They either didn't understand or necessarily have the skills to reacquire and re-drill the hole through the skin into where the existing hole was. And at the time, I was somewhat pessimistic in expecting up to 70% of the Pawnees used in aerotoning would not pass one or both of the requirements, based on the fact that we've got almost all the aircraft have an agricultural history, and some of the leading edge changes may have been somewhat literally agricultural in replacements, thinking cowboys with drills here. We were, I think, exceptionally fortunate with only 14 or 35% of the Pawnees failing one or both of the inspections. I suspect a lot of the Pawnees have had spar replacements either during the conversion or rebuilding into tow planes or something similar like that. Can't quite believe that we had such a low percentage get through given some of their history. Of the 14 that failed, there were 5 that failed through corrosion. That was, unfortunately, I found that a bit disappointing. I would have thought that the annual inspections would have been able to pick that up and deal with it appropriately. 7 of those were from misdrilled holes, and 2 of which I know they've been parked, but I don't know the details of what went wrong. Now, we had an alternate means of compliance, which was approved by CASA, and thank you to Richard Trail for being the Part 21 on that and putting it through without cost to Gliding Australia, which was to use the small round inspection hatches instead of the large rectangular hatches specified in the service bulletin. And through an interesting set of circumstances, we were able to get what was effectively a waiver from CASA to not perform the eddy current. Now, the eddy current was a requirement from the Argentine Airworthiness Authority. It was not specified in either of the service bulletins from Levere SA. So the problem we had was the eddy current required a fairly prescriptive process to calibrate the equipment and define what equipment to use, and that was not provided with as part of the AD. Now, it's lucky that we've only had 14 of the Pawnees fail, but it's still a pretty tough for the clubs that were dependent on those 14 Pawnees. So it's not, whilst we're lucky, it's still an unfortunate circumstance to be in. As I said before, we've recently only just re-established communications with Levere SA. I've now got a direct email to one of their engineers rather than the generic admin inbox that the rest of the world is using. I have done a draft fatigue analysis on the front spar and looking at a number of issues. And I have provided a draft of that to the engineers at Levere SA. I've requested that they provide me access to the original Piper spar stress analysis, and they're looking at granting that at the moment. That will enable me to verify that the stress analysis that I did from first principles is close to accurate, or as close as I can get. And we can then move forward and see if we can get the fatigue analysis checked and approved, and hopefully that will enable us to extend the reinspection interval considerably. The graph on the right-hand side was the lifetime to grow a pair of 50 thou cracks out of one of the holes centrally located in the flange at the worst place on the spar. I did a comparison with the hole location of where it is on the flange and with the usage of the aeroplane. So the blue line is for people doing ag work, the orange line is for aerotow use. And I was incredibly lucky to find data from 1975, which was possibly recorded at Benalla, for the use of a Pawnee as a tow plane. I don't think that is fairly unique worldwide, and that no other country would have done any kind of fatigue work like that previously. On the far right is the screw hole located as close as possible to the spar cap itself as allowed by the go, no-go gauge provided in the service bulletin. The hole in the middle there is the hole located very centrally in the flange. The third hole from the right is where the screw hole almost but not quite touches the edge of the bulb. One of the interesting facts I found is that with the go, no-go gauge provided by Levere in the service bulletin, it does actually allow the screw hole to penetrate part of the inner edge of the bulb on the edge of that flange. That has a pretty drastic influence on the fatigue life. Now this is a logarithmic vertical axis, but it is more than halves the time it takes to grow a crack out to failure if the screw actually starts to damage that bulb. So one of the recommendations out of this is that the bulb should not be damaged by any of the screw holes, and I think Levere needs to change their no-go gauge to accommodate that. It also shows the difference in lifing between agricultural use and aerotow use. Because we're not carting a large amount of superphosphate or pesticide around in the fuselage, the lifetime is significantly extended from that. And because we're not throwing the airplane around as much as the agricultural pilots do, the G frequency is a lot lower, and that also gives us an extension on the life as well. Now for Max, what does the bulb mean? I'll see if I've got I don't think I've got a cross section immediately to hand. The spar has a I-beam shape where the ends of the I-beam caps are turned down with these vertical flanges. At the bottom end of those flanges, or the free end of those flanges, it's reinforced by a bulge. And I think if I go to the next slide, that will show it right there. So that is the cross section of the spar in grey. You've got the flange where the screw is the vertical element, and it's got that bulged area, which is called a bulb, at the end of that. There's a fair bit of cross-sectional area in that, and it's used to stiffen the flange to give it more resistance to buckling and failure in compression. The one thing we're working on at the moment is a draft of a repair scheme. Levere SA have confirmed to me that they do not have an approved repair scheme for the front spar other than complete spar replacement. The repair of the area is challenging, to say the least. The width of the spar cap is not really wide enough to get fasteners through it, at least structural fasteners that we want to use through there. It just simply haven't got the width to put fasteners through. And putting a repair element on the vertical flange would then get in the way of rib installations and the skin installation and things like that. So the thing we are looking for at the moment is for where we have misdrilled holes, to blend out the holes completely, so you have a very large scallop out of the web, out of the flange, sorry, and then put these steel straps onto the web. And the reason why we're using steel is because steel is a lot stiffer than aluminium, and we want to try and move load or structural loads out of the spar cap and into the steel straps and reduce the load that's being carried in that area. Early days at the moment, it's looking like it's going to work. The fastener stresses we're using, to go technical, -6 Cherry Max. So these are a blind pop rivet, so you only need to get access from one side. So you only need to access the rear face. The one we're looking at now is these are two actual L angles that are nested. I'm sorry, Jeff, you keep on unmuting yourself and I keep on muting you. So just to provide comfort to people, if there's any background noise at your end, I'd like you to keep you muted, please. Sorry, getting back on track. So using the -6 cherries gives you the ability to only access one side. We're using these L angles, which provide extra reinforcement or extra stiffness around the cap area. We're just going to experiment with the finite element model, and a big thanks to Pete Brooks for taking his time to create and run these finite element models for us. It takes a few hours out of his computer to run the solve on these. And just see if we can get away with just a plain strap, so not having the L angle at the top. Hopefully that would then make it even easier to slide these things in, particularly if you have an area of multi-site damage where you have several blend outs in a row. You'll then have quite a long repair to slide in. To Fred, would you consider bonding the repair as well? Now, the bonding was discussed. There were proponents for it and proponents against it. At the moment, we felt that the skills required to get a guaranteed bond between the web and the repair elements wasn't not necessarily out there in the civil aviation world. I know the military have done it, and I've certainly designed repairs in the military that were bonded. So with the skill set not there, the reliability we felt was not necessarily going to be there. We had some doubts as to whether CASA would necessarily approve it. It's great technology. It does work in certain circumstances. The ability to get a really clean joint between the two surfaces and then to bond it on is key. And so we've had Pawnees that have been kicking around dusty old glider paddocks with the chance that there is still some superphosphate dust kicking around the place. Yeah, a bit of a question mark there, and it's one we would rather avoid for expediency. Fred, you have a question?
Yeah, Anthony, can you hear me?
Yes, I've got you.
Yeah, mate, I'm talking as well as, not instead of. I've been working on a D5 at the moment. I use a lot of Pro Seal. It stinks like hell, but it's a very easy bonded repair to do, and by God, it makes the surfaces, like it sticks, and you're not going to get it apart. You'll destroy it pulling it apart.
Yeah, it's the long-term longevity. The main problem you tend to find is debonding occurring in air due to moisture content corrosion on the surface happening, and then the whole lot debonds all at once. Now, you can use a mixture where you have what is effectively called in the industry chicken rivets, where you're too scared to rely on the bond. And you can have a look at the Aloha Airlines failure there about the chicken rivets and the failure of the bonded lap joints on the 737 fuselage skins. We were looking at an adhesive called FM300, exceptionally strong metal bonding agent. We did consider it. It's more a case of being able to apply it reliably. Now, I will caveat this. These are probably going to be what you call a wet install repair, because these are steel repair straps going onto an aluminium structure. You want to try and isolate the two somewhat, or else you're going to get a galvanic reaction. So these probably will be what's a wet install with some kind of sealant, just to reduce the electrical conductivity between the two surfaces and break up that galvanic reaction a little bit. Yeah. So that'll be in the write-up. This is intending to be a one-size-fits-all repair, so any blend out on any spar cap flange should be able to be repaired using these elements, because it's been designed for the worst case. The one thing that we won't be able to repair is if the screw hole has gouged the underside of the spar cap. This isn't going to work at the moment. The inspectability of that area is then covered up by those lips. If we are able to get away with just two steel flat straps, we may then reconsider whether we can get away with damage to the underside of the spar cap. At the moment, I am reluctant to say more than that. I don't think it's really possible. As we start to remove more and more cross-sectional area to blend out the damage from the spar cap, we've got to make the repairs bigger and stronger and tougher, and we're going to end up running out of space in there to achieve it. However, this is an advanced draft at the moment. It's been through several iterations at the moment. The one problem we're really running into now with this design is time. We're hitting into the Christmas area. This is being run on volunteer effort, and people want to go flying over Christmas and take a break. So it's unlikely that we'll get too much done now till after Christmas. It's just one of those unfortunate things where you're using volunteer engineers to run a project like this. There's that triangle of quality, speed, and cost. You can pick 2 out of 3. We're keeping the cost down by using volunteers, but we need to keep the quality and the up instead, and the speed is the one that's going to be the penalty, the one that misses out. But we're working on it. Moving on to incidents and defects. Most of the information is either from SAW reports or defect reports and is all that I have. I do try to group these together in terms of theme or by aircraft types. I'm not picking on a particular manufacturer or a particular sailplane type. There is just an amount of coincidence involved sometimes. And again, the caveat, it's not the purpose of either the aircraft incident investigation or a defect investigation to apportion blame or liability. We want to prevent the occurrence of accidents and incidents, and history has shown that if you start blaming people or assigning liability out of these things, people stop reporting them. We want people to report these, so we have the no blame culture. Any action that we take as a result of either the accident or the defect is to prevent the reoccurrence. We're not into punishing people. So, DG 500 and DG 1000, there was an AD that came out of DG for a large range of their models where the adjustment for backlash was being over tightened and then preventing the roller from moving to the full extent on the connecting track. And in extreme circumstances, this was causing bending or fracture of the tie rod end. Now, in 2 DG 500s were inspected. One was tight and did not have full movement of the roller in the track. There was some wear evident on the roller as a result, but the rod end was not bent. The second aircraft that was inspected, again, the fitting was tight and that the rod arm was in fact bent. DG 1000 also inspected the aircraft connections there are related, or I think are even identical. Again, they found that it was over tightening of the backlash screw or the adjusting screw. And I have heard anecdotal evidence of other DGs finding this issue. So that's why the AD is out. Unfortunately, it does require replacement of the rod end, I believe. A potentially nasty one, this is a twin Aster back in July where the controls were incorrectly in the rear of the cockpit, incorrectly assembled. The aircraft was reported as being not responding to the elevator controls and had insufficient low-speed trim after it had some exterior refinishing work done and some refurbishment done in the cockpit. What had happened was the 2 control rods on this bell crank were connected round the other way. So the rod from the cockpit was installed on the outer bearing and the rod to the elevator was installed on the inner bearing, resulting in less leverage being applied to the elevator. The unfortunate thing was this got through an annual inspection as assembled. There was a disconnect, if you pardon the pun, between the people at the club and where the annual inspection was being carried out. The controlled deflections were being carried out at the club prior to the annual inspection, but at some point that wasn't being checked against data. As it was, when it was connected round correctly as shown in the photo here, the elevator deflection was increased from 95 millimetres to 162 millimetres. So over 50% extra throw on the elevator deflection. So it's no surprise that there was now better speed control, but this could have been quite a serious incident as a result of these two rods being connected round the other way. Easy mistake to make, particularly when you have everything disconnected. Usual way of preventing this is to take a photo of the area prior to disassembly, so you've got a photographic record. You can also put wire through the bearings and a tag as to which rod connects to where. One I've used in the past is if you disconnect the cockpit push rod, you put the bolt and nut through the bearing, and when you disconnect the elevator push rod, you put the bolt and nut through the push rod. So it then becomes very clear which way around those go back together again, because putting the elevator push rod onto where the cockpit push rod is connected, you've got two bolts, and you're going, well, why is that? However, this could have been particularly nasty, and there was action being taken now to improve the communication between how the people at the club and where the annual inspections were being carried out. A tossed main wheel. This is off a Geodiscus. I will say, without criticising the design, this is a -5 wheel on a fairly large 2-seat sailplane, where I thought maybe a -6 size wheel might have been a bit better. During the survey of a Geodiscus, the main wheel hub was found to be badly cracked, with the crack running around at least half of the circumference. From the exterior, very hard to see because it was hidden behind the disc of the disc brake. I understand that the radial stiffeners on the other side of the flange here are machined down to allow fitment of the disc brake, and so this area is not as stiff as the old drum brake arrangement possibly was. 2,143 landings on it. It had a previous weld repair in the area, and it looks like the crack's gone around the heat affected zone. I will say that for the cast aluminium, these weld repairs are typically a temporary repair or a stopgap measure, and if you do a weld repair to these cast aluminium wheels, it should be inspected quite thoroughly moving forwards every annual inspection. JS1, a debond in the fin. Apparently this is a reasonably common occurrence on the type, not necessarily well reported. You have a stiffener that supports the upper rear trailing edge on the top of the fin. It doesn't connect that well structurally to the spar of the fin, and you get cracking or debonding in the corner there. I don't know what JS or Yonkers are going to do with that kind of thing, but if it's been reported, you'll probably end up finding some kind of repair scheme that adds a bit more connection in between the spar web and that carbon fibre stiffener. An interesting one, this is a DG500M with a cracked prob hub mounting plate. Now this aircraft has had this Solo 2625 engine fitted by supplemental type certificate and STC mod. The prop hub is shrink fitted onto the drive shaft, onto the spindle. So the spindle's cooled down, the prop hub is heated up, so it expands, it's dropped over the shaft, and then when it's cooled down, there's an interference fit onto the shaft. This leads to very high circumferential stresses in the prop mounting plate. And this has resulted in stress corrosion cracking. So you can see there has been an amount of corrosion taking place on the prop hub. So you have a crack forming as it corrodes, and as the crack levers open, it exposes fresh material for the corrosion to penetrate. And that's where you end up with this multi-site crack growth. And these cracks will continue to grow until the circumferential stress is relieved. So once this crack at the top is broken through, it's relieved the stresses around that prop hub. The prop hub is probably going to start slipping on the shaft, and these cracks, other radial cracks, will cease growing because the stress is no longer being applied to them. That's been reported back to the manufacturer. I know the prop hub has been replaced. I don't know if they're going to change the design on that. A Pawnee, one that's actually flying, had jammed controls. The pilot was flying a 2-seat Pawnee. This is the one with a side-by-side seat. It's about 1.5 people wide. The pilot was wearing a noise-cancelling headset, and it has a little hand control in the middle of the lead. After doing a number of tows, the pilot was on descent and found that they could not pull the stick back beyond the neutral point. Fortunately, the aircraft was landed safely. Post-flight, they found that the hand control for the headset had dropped down between the floor of the aircraft and the control stick fitting. First time I've heard of a headset control falling down into the controls, but the obvious lack of a stick boot of any kind is a bit of a giveaway here. If you don't have stick boots and things like that fitted where you've got exposed gaps on your controls, you need to be extremely careful of your FOD hazard in the cockpit. I know a lot of the older, more vintage style aircraft were not traditionally fitted with stick boots, and quite a few aircraft has since been retrofitted with stick boots to try and prevent that kind of thing. It used to be that a lot of coins could get dropped. Carrying coins not so common anymore, but certainly pens and memory sticks and all sorts of other bits and pieces can end up falling into those control gaps and jamming things up without people realising. An Asta CS77 with the flight controls not safetied appropriately. During daily inspection, one aileron and both air brakes, the hotelier connectors, were found to not be correctly safety pinned. The connectors were due for a lubrication 2 weeks earlier. There's no record in the maintenance release that an independent control check had been signed out after the controls were disconnected and reconnected with the lubrication. The sailplane flew several times on the day after the connectors were lubricated, but had not been flown since. So it's been picked up on the next DI. And you can see here that the safety pin is on the wrong side of the wedge and not through the hole in the wedge at all. And there were 3 of the connectors like this. It's difficult. You're looking in through the little inspection hatch through the fuselage. It's a known problem on so many of the FRP sailplanes. If you attended any of the safety seminars that were held recently in Queensland, New South Wales, Western Australia, South Australia, you would have heard me talk about this kind of thing. It was a good pickup on the DI. Unfortunate that it had happened in the first place. So 10 out of 10 for the second DI, minus 10 points for the when it was done in the first place. But you do need to double check when you disconnect the controls and reconnect the controls. It is a requirement to have an independent inspection. That's standard practice throughout the aviation community. All right, any questions? That that's pretty much it from me. It's been a fun 5 years as chair of Airworthiness, and not without its challenges. I've had a lot of help from a lot of people, and from you, thank you very much. I certainly wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a lot of safe and happy flying over the next summer. Yes, Fred. Fred, you got your hand up. Do you want to have a chat?
Just a quick one, Anthony. Thanks very much for your communications, mate. It's been absolutely brilliant. You actually feel like you're part of something with the work that you've done, and it's always easy to follow what's going on. So that's great. My question is regarding airworthiness inspection renewals. At one stage, we were talking about doing them online or trying to get something happening, because it's real difficult to get a catch up on it.
Yeah, look, we do rely on the RMAs to run regular refresher training. I was looking at having a online exam after these sorts of webinars. However, I finished preparing the webinar at about 3:30 this afternoon and didn't have time to put together an exam on this one. And I've just been snowed under with Pawnee and other issues that I haven't had time to get fingers to keyboard. It is a reasonable idea to implement. It just takes time and effort, that's all. And I just ran out of time and effort.
Fair enough.
So it will be up to whoever follows in my footsteps as chair, Airworthiness, whether they want to try and implement that kind of thing or come up with some other solution.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep on Len's back.
Yes. Lindsay.
Yeah, Anthony, I just wanted to give you a very big thank you for the efforts you put in the last 5 years. Having worked fairly closely beside you both on the board and and in the airworthiness panel, it's the work that you've put in has been outstanding. So a very big thank you to you.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's been rewarding, certainly been possibly more than my fair share of challenges in between stepping up to the role and instantly having COVID arrive and some of the challenges that brought, and then Part 149 and now lastly Pawnee. So hopefully it's in a far better place than what it was, and that whoever comes after me is not going to be faced with such dramatic and interesting challenges. Now, the position is technically vacant. We don't have anyone lined up for the position at the moment. There are inquiries being made and arms being twisted. I'm happy to do a handover takeover with whoever comes next. Anybody else? All right, well, that's it from me. I hope you all have a great Christmas and hope you all get some good flying in. Thank you all for coming along.